Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me spend some time with you. And by the way, thank you for allowing me some time last week to spend with family. That was well enjoyed. I ate too much, but it was a good time. Don't forget to hit those like buttons, share buttons, subscribe buttons. And if I don't do this, I get messages. The books are available at authorjerrymitchell.com. Also, you can follow the links at givegod90.com if you are so interested. Okay, we are going to look at something today. This shouldn't be confusing. I hope I can explain this the way I want to. One of the types of questions that I'm often asked is how we do something. You know, like, how do we observe the Sabbath? How do we love our neighbor? And what's really being asked is how our Creator wants us to display our worship for Him, or how we interact with each other, those kind of things. And a similar question I received not too terribly long ago. Basically, why does the Bible seem to be so specific about some things, while other things it seems to be so vague? Right? Now, and we'll get into some of this. Now, regular listeners will recognize this, something I say all the time. The Bible, in its original language, in its original context, is agonizingly specific. And it really is. There are some very explicit, complete instructions, right? Noah building the ark, for example. Those instructions are extremely, complex. We almost have verbal blueprints, if I can use that analogy, for how to build the tabernacle and the things that were going to be used in its construction. And there are pages and pages of agonizing genealogies with names in English that most English speakers can't pronounce, right? And they often get overlooked and bypassed because who really needs to know who begat whom, right? They're there. I used to skip over them too. And then there's those things that people seem to be really concerned about, where very little detail is given on how to apply these things to our lives. So let's begin with the most specific instructions, one by one. No, don't worry. I'm not going to go through each one. This is going to be pretty general, right? If you read carefully, though, you're going to find that the most specific instructions are for the way things are built, the tabernacle, later used in the temple, instructions for how the priests are to dress, how to conduct the sacrifices, the oblations while performing their duties, right? Those things are extremely specific, and they're specific to a certain group of people. The genealogies, well, they help us identify various families, right? And that those families are an important part of biblical history. Although there are some people like Bathsheba, where we don't have that intricate genealogy. We don't know exactly where she comes from. But generally speaking, the more specific the instruction, the more specific the person or group of people those instructions are for. The more vague the instructions, such as love thy neighbor as thyself, right? They're for everybody. And while we're given certain ways to apply this, like don't steal, right? We're told not to move the boundary markers on our land, use fair weights and measures. Those things help guide us to love our neighbor as ourselves. And the rest of it is sort of left up to each of us on an individual level. And it's done that way on purpose. And that purpose is there is a tremendous amount of freedom in that vagueness, right? We have the freedom to do all the good for each other that we're able to do. And the reality is, we're given very few restrictions, right? We don't murder, we don't kill without reason, we don't steal, we don't commit adultery, we don't desire the things that our neighbor might have. And it's really not about a house or a car. It's more about a spouse or a child. So the list of things that are forbidden is really very short. But the freedom we have to do all the good we can is only limited by what we may possess. And that can be emotional, it can be physical, it can be spiritual. And oddly, though, we find ways to argue about the vagueness of some things. And I think one of the best examples can be found in Leviticus 35:3. And it gets a lot of attention because of the way it's traditionally understood. Don't kindle a fire on the Sabbath. Now, the question is, when fire was such an important part of life in early Hebraic history, why not, if the fire goes out, why can't I start a fire to keep my house and children warm on the Sabbath? I've talked about that before, quite often. Now, the word that is used to kindle or start a fire has more than one meaning, like a lot of words in many languages do. And context is everything. Remember, in its original language and context, it is agonizingly specific. The problem is, even in this particular context, it's a little confusing. The preceding verse to that, 6 days will work be done, but the seventh day is a holy day, a Sabbath, a complete rest. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath must not be put to death. Do not light a fire in any of your dwellings on the Sabbath day. Well, if fire was so important, especially in the desert in the wintertime, why, if that fire goes out, you get cold, right? But see the word there. Don't, the word kindle, the word to start a fire really can't be easily translated into English. It can be also translated, don't burn a fire. It can be translated, don't take away a fire. Don't waste a fire. And it can even mean not to feed a fire. Now, we get a lot of arguing about this. Oh, you can heat your house, you just can't work. Maybe. Let's dig into this some more. Because in each of these meanings, in each of these ways of translating this into English, don't burn a fire, don't take a fire away, don't waste a fire, don't feed a fire, which makes the most sense for a culture living in an area and in a time where it was so important to keep your tent warm at night, maybe for cooking, maybe for warming food. And yes, I do have a theory. Now, this is speculation. This is only my theory. So bear with me a moment. Our Creator was trusting the Israelites to trust Him completely, right? Now, it tells us that their shoes didn't wear out for 40 years while they were traveling. It tells us the manna was supplied every day with a double portion on the sixth day, so they didn't have to gather their food on the seventh day. Could it be that the fire in their tent would not go out on the Sabbath? Think about this. Each household, each household living in the wilderness would observe a miracle every week. They didn't have to start a fire. They didn't have to feed the fire. You didn't have to keep putting sticks on it. Right? You know, if you have a wood stove or a fireplace, fire gets a little low, you got to throw another log on the fire. What if you didn't have to do that? What if the miracle was the fire just kept burning in your house every Sabbath day? Now, I can't prove this because it's not written anywhere else, but it works, right? And it could be something that people were talking about and everybody knew it at the time, so there was no need for documentation of this. We get a little bit of that in various places. If they didn't need to feed the fire, they didn't need to start the fire, it just kept burning on the Sabbath day through the power of our Creator. And I could be wrong. I will admit I could be wrong because I am speculating about this. But think about this. If you're not supposed to start a fire in your home on the Sabbath day, but the fire goes out, your children are going to be cold. Your wife is going to be cold. Your family is going to be cold. It gets cold in the desert at night. But if it was the power of our Creator that kept it going, doesn't it make sense that He's going to keep His children safe? He's going to keep them warm. He's going to keep them comfortable, although they still grumbled a lot. Isn't it a testimony to the character and nature of our Creator? By Him being able to keep their fires going, they could see every week the miracle of the double portion on the sixth day, the double portion of manna on the sixth day. They could see every week, my fire doesn't go out on the Sabbath. They could see these things. They could talk about these things for 40 years. For 40 years. It's consistent with the biblical narrative. You know, a lot of times Moses jumps around in his writing, but sometimes he's continuous. But the next topic he writes about are the offerings in the tabernacle. And if this particular instruction was just for the Israelites while they were in the wilderness for 40 years, it makes sense. And it also, I think, helps explain why we have so much trouble with this today. It was specific to this group of people in their situation. So hopefully you can see how discussing something that seems so specifically vague can lead to various thoughts, various concepts, until we step back and we think, well, it doesn't make sense for this to happen. These are real people living real lives, but there was other things going on that are written about later. It's a possibility. It's a possibility. The way things come together in the Bible, sometimes you've got to step back and take that overview. You can't always, the details are there, but it's finding them sometimes that is the hard part. So when you think that something might be vague, a good question to ask yourself is this vague because it's giving me as an individual freedom to do good? Don't work on Shabbat. Don't work on the Sabbath. Is it vague because it's giving me the freedom to worship and do good? And doing good for our Creator and for each other is something that is always allowed. always allowed. And that is something to think about until next time. And I hope that made sense. I think it did. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. You can send me a email or a message. Some of you have my private messaging, and that's fine. But if you have questions, let me know. Let me know. And until next time, I do wish you many, many blessings, everyone.